Her father's hands shook as he pushed her toward the tall hunter. A small sack of cowries dropped to the ground with a dull thud. 2 bleating goats were tied beside it, payment for her life. "Mama, Papa, where are you sending me?" Ada whispered. Her mother turned her face away, pretending not to hear. The hunter grabbed her wrist without a word. And just like that, she was sold. Welcome back. As you enjoy the story, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and also share with your friends. Now back to the story. Ada's mother did not look her in the eye. Her father's hands shook as he pushed her forward toward the tall man with a bow slung across his back. The hunter dropped a small sack of cowries and 2 tied goats at their feet. "She will follow me," he said. Ada's breath broke. "Papa, Mama, where are you sending me?" Her father turned away. Her mother's wrapper, blue anchor with yellow circles, fluttered in the wind, but her mouth stayed tight. The goats bleated. The cowries clinked. The hunter's fingers closed around Ada's wrist. They began to walk. When she looked back, her parents stood still like trees after a storm, not waving, not calling her name, as if watching her would set their hearts on fire. The village square around them pretended to breathe as usual. Boys ran after a tire with a stick. Women kneaded fufu under a mango tree. A man in a faded boo-boo argued over the price of smoked fish. Nobody called for help. Nobody asked questions. It felt like a bad play with no director, everything moving, but the worst part happening in the middle. The hunter kept his pace, steady and quiet. He wore a brown, sun-faded tunic and carried a small bag on his side. His feet were dusty. On his shoulder, the bow looked like a resting bird. Ada's wrapper, red anchor with black spirals, suddenly felt too tight at her waist. She wanted to pull her hand free. She did not. She wondered if that counted as obedience or fear. They reached the edge of the square, where a trader spread Kent cloth on a mat. The cloth shone with green lines and gold patterns, meant for big ceremonies, not days like this. The trader, an old man with a scar across his chin, lifted his head and watched them pass. He said nothing. "I can walk by myself," Ada said at last. The hunter looked at her, surprised that she had a voice. He released her wrist. "We have a far road." "What is your name?" she asked. "Caleb," he said. Her mouth shaped the name with air. Caleb. A name she could say, a man she did not know. She swallowed. "I am Ada." "I know," he said. "How?" "Your father said." She blinked. Words felt like dry nuts in her throat. They walked past the last houses, mud walls, thatch roofs, smoke lines rising like thin fingers. A little boy chased a chicken and nearly ran into them. His mother yanked him back by the arm and stared at Ada the way people look at a broken pot. Sorry to see it, but glad it is not theirs. They reached the footpath that cut through low grass and scrub. The sun leaned high but not kind. Birds shouted in the distance. Ada kept pace with Caleb, listening to the sound of their steps. Something else rose behind them. The whisper of gossip, already starting, already forming its own legs. Only that morning, she had washed plates with her sister, Joy, behind the house. They had joked about a widow who wore her kanga wrapper backwards to the market. Even in hunger, they had found a small laugh. Ada had tied her scarf and thought, "Today I will ask Mama for bean cake." The thought felt childish now. She saw a palm tree ahead and couldn't help it. "Why did you buy me?" Caleb did not answer right away. She could hear the rub of his bag against his side. "You needed a place," he said at last. "I had a place," she said. He glanced at her. "Did you?" She looked at the ground. Stones pushed up like stubborn teeth. The truth had a bitter taste. The last 2 harvests had failed. The family farm lay like a tired animal, ribs showing. Debts had grown like weeds. Last week, a man came to the door with a piece of paper and a loud voice, shouting about the money her father owed. After he left, people had gathered outside, talking with their hands, judging with their eyes. Her father drank palm wine late into the night and spoke to the roof as if it were a person. The decision took shape like a shadow at noon, sudden, sharp, and close. Her uncle said a hunter who passed through sometimes needed a wife to keep his hut in order. Someone quiet, someone strong. A word like bride price sat on the table between them, then shifted into another word that felt worse than salt in a wound: payment. Ada did not hear the details. Women do not always hear the words that move their lives, but they carry the weight. The path narrowed, then widened into a dry riverbed. Caleb jumped down and offered a hand. She hesitated, then took it. His palm was warm, rough with small scars. "Do you always speak so little?" she asked. "I speak when there is need," he said. "Is today not a day of need?" Her voice shook and she hated it. Caleb looked up at the sky, squinting. "We will talk when we have water." They climbed the other side and followed the road into open land. Ada tried to guess where his hut could be. She knew the villages on her side of the hill. Houses with old women who argued about whose pepper was hotter, men who wore short boo-boos to meetings, girls who stitched Ankara head ties while humming. This side felt different. Even the birds sounded like strangers. They walked silently for a while. Ada's mind refused to be quiet. She remembered small things: how her mother's hands trembled when tying her scarf in the morning, how Joy would tilt her head when listening for market news, how her father used to carry her on his shoulders when she was little and thunder scared her. A question sat in her chest like a heavy stone. If they loved me, why did they let me go? The sun dipped a little. Caleb stopped on a rocky shelf and opened his small bag. He took out a calabash cup and a wrapped leaf parcel. "Sit," he said. Ada Saturday. Her knees felt like weak wood. He poured water into the cup and handed it to her. She drank slowly. The water tasted like clay and cool shade. He opened the leaf parcel. Inside lay roasted plantain, bruised but edible. "Eat," he said. She took one piece. "Will there be more later?" He shook his head. "Not today." She ate half and handed the rest back. He looked at the plantain, then at her. "You will be hungry later." "You will be hungry too," she said. He nodded once and took the piece back. They ate in silence, listening to wind pass through dry grass. A lizard darted across a stone and froze, watching them with a bright eye. After a while they stood and walked again. The path bent around a cluster of shade trees, then dipped toward low wetlands where frogs hid. Caleb pointed to a narrow footbridge made of 3 logs lashed together. "Careful," he said. Ada stepped 1 foot, then the other, arms out for balance. The water below ran slow, carrying leaves from somewhere else. She reached the end and waited while Caleb crossed with his bow and bag. He moved easily, like he had done this all his life. On the other side, they passed a woman pounding grain in a mortar. She wore a patterned kanga wrapper, green with white shells, tied firm at her waist. A baby slept at her back, head tipped. The woman stopped pounding and watched them. Her eyes slid over Caleb and settled on Ada. The look was not kind, not cruel. It was measuring. She returned to her pounding without a word. The pestle beat out a slow, steady drum. "People are watching," Ada said. "They always watch," Caleb said. "Do you care?" "I notice." They reached a small rise. From there, Ada saw a cluster of huts far off, smoke threading into the sky. Caleb gestured with his chin. "They." Her stomach twisted. The huts looked tired, as if built by someone who had given up on neat lines. Chickens scratched in the dust. A small boy kicked a gourd, chasing it in aimless circles. A woman hung clothes on a rope, Ankara blouses in pink and black, a faded shirt, a wrapper torn at the edge. As they walked in, the woman paused and looked at them. She had strong arms and soft eyes that seemed older than her face. "Caleb," she said. "Sarah," he replied. Her gaze moved to Ada. Sarah's head wrap had slipped. A thin line of hair showed under the cloth. "Is this the one?" "Yes," Caleb said. Sarah glanced at Ada's hands, at her face, at the edge of dust on her feet. She looked past Ada at the line of the path they had taken. "Welcome," she said quietly. "Water is there." She pointed to a clay pot under an eave. "Thank you," Ada said, surprised at her own voice. Sarah kept watching, like a guard who had seen too many sad stories. There is a mat inside the last hut. You can sit. Ada followed Caleb to a low hut at the edge of the cluster. The wall leaned a little. A wood post held it steady. The roof sagged in one corner. He lifted the raffia curtain. Inside lay a small mat, a narrow hearth of 3 stones, and a broken calabash turned upside down to cover something. A piece of cloth hung from a nail, a shirt, washed thin by time. In the corner stood his bow, and a bundle of arrows wrapped in leather. "This is your place," he said. She turned slowly, taking in the room. "It is small. It is what I have." He set his bag down and crouched by the hearth. "We will make fire later. There is cassava. No soup." He said it as a plain fact, the way one says the sun is hot. No shame, no pride. Ada laid a hand on the wall. The mud was dry and cool. 1,000 thoughts moved in her head and then stopped. She sat on the mat and folded her legs under her, the way her mother had taught her when guests came. The habit felt cruel now. She heard a step outside. Sarah lifted the curtain and entered with a small bowl. She wore a simple blouse and a wrapper that had seen many wash days. "Take," she said, placing the bowl on the floor. It held palm oil stew, thin, with a few pieces of fish and bitter leaf. Ada's throat tightened. "Thank you." Sarah nodded. "Eat while it is warm." She looked at Caleb. "You went to fetch water without your small pot. Again." "I forgot," Caleb said. Sarah rolled her eyes, fond and tired. "You forget many things when you go far." She turned to Ada. "Do you have people?" "I did," Ada said. Sarah let the answer sit in the air. "Heem," she said at last, the sound carrying both pity and restraint. "If you need soap, ask me. I make mine better than the women over there." She jerked her chin toward the other side of the cluster as if pointing toward a small war. "They put too much ash." Ada almost smiled. "I will ask." When Sarah left, the hut felt larger and older. Caleb lifted the bowl and set it between them. "Eat first," he said. "Together," Ada answered. He broke 2 small lumps of cassava, placed one in front of her, and kept one for himself. They ate slowly, as if eating too fast might shame the food. The stew tasted like home and not home at the same time. "Why did my parents agree?" she asked, barely above a whisper. Caleb finished a bite. "They could not pay what they owed." "They could have asked for more time," she said, heat rising in her chest. "Time is not a friend when the ground is dry," he said. "They could have asked the elders." "They did," Caleb said. "The elders asked the man with the paper to wait." The man laughed. Ada stared at her hands. She saw small scars from farm tools, the fine dust caught in the lines. She felt a pull in her chest that was not hunger. She pushed the bowl slightly away and took a breath. "You could have taken someone else," she said. Caleb met her eyes for the first time in a full minute. His eyes were calm, dark, steady. "I was told you are strong," he said. "You wake before dawn. You keep your word. You listen more than you speak." "Who told you?" "People listen to themselves when they gossip," he said. "I listen too." "Did they also say I cry?" she asked. "Because I will cry tonight." "That is allowed," he said. She looked away. A fly buzzed near the hearth. The hut smelled like smoke and dry earth and a faint note of palm oil. From outside came the soft thud of Sarah's steps and the squeal of the little boy chasing his gourd again. Life continued in its stubborn way. The sun slid lower. Caleb stood and took the empty bowl to the doorway. "I will return the bowl to Sarah," he said. "Then I will fetch firewood." "I will fetch it," Ada said, standing quickly. "I know where to find it." Caleb considered. "Do you know the paths here?" "No," she admitted. "I will go with you," he said. "There are thorn bushes." They walked out. Sarah took the bowl with a small nod and handed Ada a short rope. "For the bundle," she said. "And for your hair later. The wind here is proud." Ada touched her scarf. "Thank you." They went toward the scrub near the wetlands. The ground there held old branches, thin and dry. Ada bent often, gathering small sticks, then larger ones, testing for rot. Caleb cut a longer branch with a knife and snapped it across his knee. The sound cracked the air. Birds flew up, then settled again. "You move like someone who has done this," he said. "I have done many things," she answered. They tied the bundle with the rope and raised it to Ada's head. She steadied it with one hand and straightened her back. The weight felt right, not light, not too heavy. She walked carefully, heel then toe, letting the load settle into the line of her spine. Caleb carried a smaller bundle at his side. As they neared the huts, two men sat on a bench carved from a log. One wore a short boo-boo the color of rust, the other, a shirt with thin stripes. They paused their talk and watched Ada carry the load. The man in the rust boo-boo nodded. "Good evening," he said. "Good evening," Ada replied. "You are the new wife," he said, not unkindly, not kindly either. "Where are you from?" "From over the hill," she said. "Over the hill," he repeated, as if the phrase held a secret he might solve if he said it slowly. Caleb nodded to them and kept walking. They did not call him back. Inside the hut, Ada lowered the bundle and cut small sticks for the hearth. She worked without asking where things were supposed to go. Her hands knew the order. Fire first. Water close by. A place for ash. She found an old pot with a cracked handle and rinsed it with a little water from the clay pot. Caleb watched, quiet, as if he were seeing a song he had heard as a child but had forgotten the words. When the fire caught, the thin smoke went up in a wavering line. Ada added the last of the cassava water to the pot and stirred with a stick. The simple smell filled the room. Caleb set two small calabash cups near the hearth. "You are not what people said," he said softly. "What did they say?" "That you were proud." Ada made a sound that might have been a laugh if it had not been so tired. Pride does not sit well in a hungry stomach. They ate again, a little, then saved the rest. Night came with a slow blue hand across the sky. Voices outside faded. A baby cried once and was hushed. Someone coughed. The frogs began their dull song in the wetlands. Ada sat on the mat and untied her scarf, smoothing the edge with a thumb. Her hairline showed in the dim light. Caleb leaned his bow against the wall and sat at the other edge of the mat. She looked toward the doorway. A moth hovered near the fire, confused by the light. She thought of her mother's face again, the way her eyes had fixed on nothing, like a door that had decided not to open. Her chest clenched. The tears came without permission. Caleb stared at the floor, giving her privacy inside the small space. He did not say, "Do not cry." He did not say, "It will be fine." He waited. After a time, the tears slowed. Ada wiped her cheeks with the edge of her wrapper. She took a careful breath. "What will I do here?" she asked. "Cook when there is food," he said. "Keep the hut. Rest when there is nothing." "And when you go to the forest?" she asked. "I go," he said. "When will you come back?" "When I do." She nodded, then surprised herself. "I do not like too many words," she said. "But I like a few clear ones." "Then we will use those," he said. She lay down, facing the wall. The mud felt cool against her palm. On the other side of the hut, Caleb stretched out and turned his face toward the door. The fire softened, then thinned to a red line. Ada closed her eyes. Images ran across the dark. The sack of cowries, the goats, her father's shaking hands, her mother's averted eyes, the old trader with the scar, Sarah's quiet bowl of stew, the men on the bench, the rope for the bundle, the birds bursting from the bushes. Each picture sat next to the next like beads on a string, heavy and bright. She felt the ache of hunger again and the ache of something else she could not name. She listened to the frogs and the faint breath of the man who had carried her life from one side of a hill to the other in the space of a day. She did not know if he was cruel or kind or something she had no words for yet. Outside, wind moved through the grass with the sound of distant talk. Inside, the hut kept its small promises. Fire when there was wood, water when the pot was full, sleep when the body finally agreed to stop arguing with the mind. She did not pray long. She said only one sentence in the language her mother had taught her. Let my heart not break where no one can see. Then she slept. Near dawn, a rooster crowed, then another, answering like an old friend. Ada woke before the light and tied her scarf, this time firm, this time without trembling. She stepped outside. The air was cool, the kind that forgives yesterday only a little. She took the clay pot and walked toward the well, passing Sarah's hut. Sarah was already awake, sweeping the yard with a short broom. She lifted her head. You wake early, Sarah said. My mother said morning is the only time that listens, Ada replied. Sarah's mouth tilted into a line that might turn into a smile on a better day. Your mother is right. She pointed to a gourd bowl near the wall. Take. It is for rinsing. Ada took it and went on. At the well, two girls were drawing water, their laughter low, their wrappers bright. One in orange anchor dotted with black seeds, the other in a teal pattern that made her eyes look like a shallow river. They looked at Ada, measured her without malice, like new cloth on a market stall. One of them said, Good morning. Ada said, Good morning, and drew water. The rope burned her palm a little. The pot filled, heavy and hopeful. When she balanced it on her head and turned back, the sky had begun to lighten. Somewhere a small fire crackled. The world made its old sounds. Ada walked carefully, sure-footed, the way a woman walks when she has decided to live even when the road does not clap for her. She reached the hut and set the pot down with a soft thump. Caleb stepped out, eyes narrowed against the dim. He looked at the full pot, then at Ada. He nodded once and said, Good. She nodded back. No big words. No big promises. Just the start of a day in a place that was now hers. By mid-morning, she would sweep, wash the calabash, and sort the small bundle of dried peppers Sarah sent as a quiet welcome. She would tie her wrapper tighter and tuck stray hair back under her scarf. She would listen for the sound of Caleb's steps if he went out, and she would learn the names of people who would speak them slowly to see how they tasted in her mouth. But for now, she stood outside the hut and felt the sun climb the low roof, and she knew, with a deep, simple certainty that did not need fancy language. The ground under her feet was real. The day was real. Her breath was real. Whatever had been sold could still hold a spirit that refused to be counted like cowries in a bag. And that was the beginning. The first weeks in Caleb's hut moved like slow water, quiet but full of weight. The days had a rhythm she did not choose. Wake before the sun, sweep the small yard, draw water from the well, cook when there was food, wait when there was none. She washed his hunting clothes by the stream, spread them on a low bush to dry, then sat by the hearth mending tears in her own wrapper. Caleb spoke little, and when he did, it was about simple things. Where to find dry wood, which path led to the nearest market, how to keep ants from crawling into the palm oil jar. His voice was steady, never raised, but not warm. Ada could not tell if he was being careful or distant. Some nights he returned with a rabbit or a small antelope slung over his shoulder, its fur still warm. He would clean it outside, his hands moving with quiet skill, then hang strips of meat near the fire to smoke. Other nights he came back with nothing but leaves and wild berries. On those nights, they ate cassava and drank water, filling the silence between them with the sound of chewing. Sarah visited often, bringing bits of dried fish or a small calabash of pepper soup. She spoke more than Caleb, telling Ada about which neighbors to greet politely and which to keep at arm's length. The woman with the scar on her forehead, Sarah whispered once, will smile at you, but count your spoons after she leaves. Ada listened, learning the invisible map of the village, who traded honestly, who spread gossip, who fought over firewood, who prayed before planting yams. In her own village, she had known such things without thinking. Here, every name, every face, felt like a stone she had to carry until it fit in her pocket. One afternoon, Caleb asked her to come with him to the market in the next village. They walked under the sun, the air thick with the smell of dry grass. The market bustled with women in bright ankara wrappers, some tied at the waist, others folded over one shoulder like a sash. Stalls leaned under baskets of yams, bunches of plantain, and heaps of peppers red enough to sting the eyes. Men in short boo-boos argued over the price of goat meat, their voices rising like drummers calling for attention. Caleb sold a bundle of smoked meat to a trader in a green head tie, then bought salt, dried beans, and a small tin of palm oil. Ada followed him, carrying the heavier bag. She noticed how he greeted some people by name and others only with a nod, and how his eyes seemed to read the market the way a hunter reads a forest, seeing more than he said. On their way back, they stopped at a stream to rest. Ada dipped her hands in the cool water, letting it run over her fingers. "Why do you live so far from the market?" she asked. "I like space," Caleb said. "It is quiet," she agreed. "Sometimes too quiet." He glanced at her. "Do you miss your old home?" She thought about it. "I miss my sister," she said. "And I miss knowing where everything is. Here, even the trees look like strangers." "They will stop being strangers," he said. When they returned, Sarah was waiting outside her hut with a small clay pot. "I cooked yam pottage," she said. "You will eat before it cools." That night, they ate together in the dim light. Ada noticed the way Caleb set her portion first before serving himself. It was a small thing, but it softened something in her chest. Days stretched into moons. Ada learned to read the signs of Caleb's return. How the dogs barked differently when it was him. How his shadow moved before he stepped into view. She began planting a small patch of okra and pepper near the hut, using the seeds Sarah gave her. Caleb helped once, showing her how to space the holes so the roots would not fight for water. One morning, she woke to find Caleb already gone. His bow was missing, and the fire was cold. She swept the yard, fetched water, then sat weaving a small mat from raffia. Hours passed. The sun dipped toward the trees, and still he did not return. She tried to push down the knot of worry in her stomach. When he finally came back, it was near dark. His tunic was torn at the shoulder, and there was a scratch across his cheek. He carried no game, only a bundle of firewood. "What happened?" she asked, stepping toward him. "Nothing worth telling," he said, setting the wood down. "That scratch is not nothing," she said. He gave a small smile, the first she had seen in weeks. "A stubborn branch," he said. She did not believe him, but she did not press. She fetched water for him to wash and warmed the last of the pottage for supper. As they ate, she noticed his eyes on her more than usual, not suspicious, not distant, but as if weighing something. Later that night, while she lay on the mat, she heard him moving quietly outside. She peered through the curtain and saw him sitting by the fire, sharpening an arrowhead. The flames lit his face in quick flashes, and for the first time, she wondered if the hunter her parents had sold her to was not just a hunter at all. The rains came early that year, pounding the roof of the hut until the thatch smelled like fresh earth. The small patch of okra and pepper Ada planted grew quickly, their green shoots pushing upward as if they had been waiting for the right moment. Caleb hunted less in the heavy rains, spending more time carving arrow shafts under the shelter of the eaves or mending traps with thin strips of hide. One afternoon, as Ada pounded cassava in the yard, she heard hurried footsteps on the wet path. A boy appeared, panting, his feet coated in red mud. "Hunter," he called toward the hut. "They are fighting at the edge of the forest, traders against our men. They sent me to call you." Caleb was already standing, bow in hand, quiver slung across his back. "Stay inside," he told Ada. His voice carried no room for argument. "Wait," she began, but he was gone, moving with long strides into the curtain of rain. The boy followed, splashing through puddles. Ada's hands shook as she set down the pestle. She sat in the doorway, staring at the path until the rain blurred it. Hours passed. The wind shifted. By nightfall, still no sign of him. When he returned, it was past midnight. His tunic was soaked through, one sleeve ripped. A long gash marked his arm, and there was mud up to his knees. She gasped. "Sit," she said, pulling him inside. "It is nothing," he muttered, but his face was pale. Ada heated water, washed the wound, and wrapped it in clean cloth. "This is not from a branch," she said quietly. Caleb looked at her for a long moment, then dropped his gaze. "No." He said no more that night, But in the days that followed, fever took him. He tossed on the mat, muttering words that did not fit the life she knew. Words about palaces, crowds bowing, names she had never heard, servants, councils, a crown. On the third day, voices approached the hut, deep, formal. Ada stepped outside to see 3 men in long boo-boos, their hems heavy with embroidery despite the muddy ground. They knelt before Caleb's doorway without hesitation. "Your Highness," the oldest one said, "we have found you at last." Ada's mouth went dry. She looked at Caleb. He was sitting up now, eyes clearer, though his face was unreadable. "Stand," he told the men. "I left for a reason." "Your father is ill," the younger man said. "The council demands your return. You are the rightful heir." Ada stared, trying to make the words fit the man she had been living with. The man who fetched water beside her, who ate the last piece of roasted plantain without ceremony, who fixed his own torn sleeve with crooked stitches. A prince? She stepped back into the hut, heart racing. Everything inside, the rough mat, the patched tunic, the chipped calabash, suddenly felt like a disguise. Caleb followed her in. "I wanted someone who would see me before the crown," he said simply. "Someone who would stay when there was no gold, no servants, no power. That is why I came here." She sat slowly, the truth settling like heavy rain on her shoulders. All this time, she had been living with a man who could have changed her life in a breath. And yet, he had chosen the quiet, the hunger, the smallness, just to see her heart. Before she could speak, the old man at the door called, "Your Highness, the horses are ready. We must leave before nightfall." Ada met Caleb's gaze. There was no command in his eyes, only a question. "Then I will go where you go," she said. And with that, her life turned toward a road she had never imagined. One that began in a mud hut and was now leading her toward the heart of a kingdom she had never seen. The journey to the city took 3 days. Ada rode behind Caleb on a tall brown horse, her hands gripping the woven strap around his waist. The air changed as they traveled, first the thick smell of wet forest, then the dry heat of open plains, and finally the faint scent of burning incense as they approached the high stone walls of the capital. The gates loomed ahead, guarded by men in red and gold tunics. The moment Caleb stepped down, the guards knelt. Whispers followed them through the wide courtyard. Ada kept close, her wrapper clinging to her legs in the breeze. Inside, the palace rose like nothing she had ever seen. Tall columns painted in deep blues and gold, wide steps polished by years of footsteps, and courtyards where fountains played in the sun. Servants bowed as Caleb passed. "Welcome home, my prince," one murmured. Ada's mind spun. She was shown to a room with carved wooden doors, a bed draped in soft white cloth, and a chest of folded Ankara wrappers in colors she had only ever seen at weddings. Yet, the walls still felt strange, the air too still, as if watching her. The next weeks were full of change. Caleb moved between council meetings and visits to the king's chamber, where his father lay pale but sharp-eyed. Ada learned the customs of the palace, how to greet elders with a low bow, how to walk behind the prince in public, how to wear her wrapper so that the gold embroidery faced forward. She spoke little, watching more than she said, as she had always done. But the calm did not last. One night, loud shouts echoed through the halls. Ada rushed out to see guards running toward the eastern wing. Caleb met her halfway, his face set. "Stay here," he ordered. By morning, the news broke. Rival factions within the council had tried to seize power. Caleb had fought to protect his father, but in the chaos, he was struck by a poisoned blade. He lived only 2 days after that. When he died, Ada's world tilted. She had come to love the man who had first walked her away from her home in silence, the man who had tested her heart without telling her. Now the palace felt hollow. She expected to be sent away. Instead, the king summoned her. His voice was weak, but his gaze was steady. "You cared for my son when he had nothing. You stood with him without knowing who he was. For that, you will not be cast aside. I name you keeper of the royal lands in the southern province. You will oversee the trade routes. The income is yours to manage." Ada bowed, words stuck in her throat. The southern province was rich in farmland and sat on the main path for traders moving salt, cloth, and kola nuts. Ada moved there quietly, bringing only what she needed. She met with farmers, set fair prices, and reopened abandoned fields. She fixed the broken wells and ensured that every trader passing through paid a small fee, not enough to cripple them but enough to grow the province's wealth. Seasons passed. Word spread of the widow of the hunter prince, who treated her people with fairness and turned the land into the most prosperous region in the kingdom. Merchants sought her favor, bringing goods from far-off coasts. Her storage barns overflowed with grain, her market bustled year-round, and her name became known in villages she had never visited. One market day, as she walked among the stalls, a familiar voice called her name. She turned to see her father and mother standing a few paces away, clothes worn, faces older. They looked at her as if unsure she was real. "Ada," her mother said, her voice breaking, "we came to ask for help." Ada studied them, remembering the day they traded her life for 2 goats and a sack of cowries. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she gestured for them to follow her to the shade of her stall. She ordered food for them, set water on the table, and listened to their story. When they finished, she nodded slowly. "I will help," she said. "Not because I have forgotten what you did, but because I have learned what it means to survive. And I have more than enough to share." Her father's eyes filled with tears. Her mother bowed her head. That night, as she stood on the balcony of her home, looking over the lantern-lit streets, Ada thought of Caleb, the man who had taught her that love is proved in hunger as much as in plenty. She had lost him, but the life they built together had carried her here. And in that quiet, she understood the truth. Wealth was not just measured in cowries or land, but in the way a person's heart could remain whole, even when it had been sold. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, subscribe and turn on your notification for more. See you soon.